Hello. Today we're going to be examining the relationship between Hector Berlioz's fifth movement in Symphonie Fantastique and parts of a triptych, Garden of Earthly Delights, painted by Hieronymus Bosch. Berlioz was a French Romantic composer who lived from 1803 to 1869. He wrote a rather influential treatise and is considered quite important in the development of Romantic music. Symphonie Fantastique was first performed in 1830 and is considered his masterwork. It is also a program symphony. Program music provides a narrative for the audience to follow, but usually involves no singing of the narrative. The painting, The Garden of Earthly Delights, has been dated between 1490 and 1510. It is the best-known work by Flemish painter Hieronymus Bosch. It has three distinct parts which depict Adam and Eve on one panel, a panorama of society in the middle, and a scene of hell on the third panel.
The Garden of Earthly Delights is considered to be one of Bosch's earlier works. It's both his best known and most ambitious complete work. The triptych is painted with oil on oak. This series is meant to be read from left to right, though in our presentation we'll only be focusing on the rightmost panel. From here on out, I will refer to the painting as the third and rightmost panel. The painting narrative travels from the foreground to the background, in other words, from the bottom part of the panel to the top. The farther you descend into the painting, the farther you are from divinity and God. The panel itself is set into three sections. From top to bottom, they are hell, purgatory, and earth. This entire panel represents man and the influences he operates under. The colors of this panel are primarily yellow ochre and red ochre. These are most pure and evident in the ground in the earth section. These colors represented intelligence and thought, and in this way, Bosch is saying that he's representing what's happening inside the human mind. He's giving the viewer a glimpse of the results of a man's lowering of consciousness. The painting is not a social commentary, but a psychological and spiritual one. Bosch has a use of symbols that is unlike the other panels. There is no living element of nature. He uses dead wood, something without the life of God in it, and turns them into arrows, weapons of destruction and death. Arrows also represent a means of communication. Much like words, they become something that travels from one place to another. They're found throughout this panel, frequently sticking out of characters' butts. He's indicating that people who pervert the word of God are talking out of their asses. Archers of any kind are shown as the ones who are using their skills to miscommunicate the word of God. The earth section really solidifies the idea of the perversion of man's authority. The hand of God himself, symbol of his word and his divine authority, is severed and stabbed with a knife, pinned to a blue shield of materialism and earthly influences. The heart of Christ, one of the holiest symbols of Christianity, is skewered on a sword by a toad. Here we can clearly see that he's being humorous in his way of taking his symbolism over the top. There's a man hanging behind the corner of the brown rectangle. What looks like a tabletop is actually a tomb. The sword, cutting his head from his body, tells us that there is no connection between the mind and the body. He does not know who he is or understand his own corrupted nature. The hunter, a rabbit, painted with very smooth strokes, carries his fresh harvest of human flesh hanging from his pike. A Goya-esque volcano of sin and corruption is erupting from his midsection. His message, which he takes from Goya's paintings, man carries hell inside of him. Now we're brought to the purgatory section. The house of judgment is what we can come to next. To the bottom left of this highlighted blue section, we can see friends climbing in to meet their fate. What we see inside this structure is friends meeting around a feast. This is, in a way, a purgatorial version of the last meal of the condemned. This is a well-known tidbit of Bosch's black humor, the idea that we will see plenty of familiar faces in hell. Bosch makes their destination very clear with a flag on top of this structure. Here he shows a mini pictogram of the pink bagpipes to the right of the structure. Here is the Wheel of Judgment, where the dead are marched around to the tune of bagpipes, filled with the breath of God. As soon as the bagpipes are passed, it's already decided where you will go. One individual has made the cut. You can tell he's going to heaven because he's accompanied by a religious woman, dressed in green, with a white veil. Green, the color, symbolizes the best that we can hope for, and white, purity. Now for the hell section. First off, we're introduced to a factory for the processing of lost souls. These lost souls are led towards the mill by an army of devils. Ghostly figures lurk in doorways. The mill pond of the damned souls has no shortage of people, or demons who supervise. What little light there is in this section provides no hope. The ears that are represented in this section, joined by the dagger, literally mean that our ears are cut from our heads. We can no longer hear the word of God. They have become the same dead wood weapon that we talked about before. In the far background of this painting is the final chapter of its story, a visual representation of hell. Here, it bears a distinct relationship to heaven. A look at this comparison will show the distinctness of Bosch's comparison. None of the similarities are an accident. Hell, according to Bosch's philosophy, is an inversion of heaven, and he's given us exactly that picture.
These are the notes that were included in the performance of Berlioz's symphony. He sees himself at a witch's sabbath in the midst of a hideous gathering of shades, sorcerers, and monsters of every kind who have come together for his funeral. Strange sounds, groans, outbursts of laughter, distant shouts which seem to be answered by more shouts. The beloved melody appears once more, but has now lost its noble and shy character. It is now no more than a vulgar dance tune, trivial and grotesque. It is she who is coming to the Sabbath. Roar of delight at her arrival. She joins the diabolical orgy. The funeral knell tolls, burlesque parody of the Dies Irae, the dance of the witches. The dance of the witches combined with the Dies Irae. So what connects these two pieces of art? I would use words like debauchery, sin, darkness, tension, absurdity, fear, parody, cruelty, and even blasphemy. There is a truly sinister quality embedded in both pieces. Another aspect that ties these two pieces of art is a sense of chaos. Berlioz's use of heavy chromaticism, dissonance, bells, and low-octave thrusts, paired with the deranged-sounding higher string and woodwind lines, create an atmosphere of odious disarray. Like a fine wine, it is paired fittingly with Bosch's scenes of defecation, vomiting, surrealism, and horror. Bosch doesn't just depict hell, but his own specially flavored version. Bosch and Berlioz would have much enjoyed an absinthe or two together.
The third panel of Bosch's Garden of Earthly Delights illustrates hell. Bosch has painted and depicted a world where humans have given into all temptations. Compared to the left and center panel, this piece lacks natural sunlight and harmonious beauty. Instead, buildings are set on fire as mutated creatures crawl across the panel, feasting upon naked humans. Bosch describes hell as not a fantasy place, but as a world containing the most actual elements from our day-to-day lives. In Berlioz's program notes for the fifth movement of Symphonie Fantastique, he writes as though he sees himself in the hands of a witch. All the monsters have come together for his funeral. He writes about the melody throughout the entire symphony, but when it comes to the fifth movement, it is now taunting him. This is the dance of the witches. In the third panel of Bosch's Garden of Earthly Delights, we can see the link between the creatures in the painting and the creatures described in Berlioz's program notes. As it's been said, Berlioz drugged himself with opium and his dark mind came to life. From there he was poisoned with the idea of creatures that haunt us every day, but now in a more distinguished, real, and vivid way.
The opening of the fifth movement provides an atmosphere of a sinister, dark world. This is encapsulated in the top right corner of the Garden of Earthly Delights. A foggy night, the setting of every horror movie, fills the observer's mind with imagined horrors that lie within. The fifth movement shows soldiers marching across a bridge while people seemingly drown in the waters beneath. The sudden burst of high-pitched chords followed by the deep lulls combine to unease the listener. It is then that the observer notices that some of the fog is really smoke from the fires burning within the town. Bosch's idea of hell is not something unrealistic and far-fetched, but something that could be feasible. The slow bass line combined with the church bells could be painting a scene of a funeral. Possibly the funeral of the poor soldier that is being devoured by the rat dogs. If there is anything left to bury, of course. These creatures could, in theory, be biologically feasible and are not totally a far-fetched idea. The horns can be thought to be a military tribute to those soldiers lost fighting this war against the monsters of hell. As you can see, the soldiers are imprisoned in the cage above the rat dogs. Here you see Lucifer, a bird-headed monster devouring a human that is meant to represent the devil himself. The triplets from the flutes in the string sections create an almost falling sensation, mimicked by the humans being expelled from Lucifer into a pit of unknown depth. The song then takes a darker turn, and it adds to the grotesque nature of the painting depicted by the sinister-looking creatures holding the lady in the bottom left.